We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. Before we introduce today's guest, I would like to remind all of the live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. But fret not, you can sign up for a limited amount of time only for a 7-day free trial. Enjoy as much content as you possibly can before you have to pay us at the end of that week freebie. But all kinds of goodies await you there at patreon.com/.
I get the gist, David, that a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are signing up at the free level in 7 days, and they're just like consuming content. But it was like, we release so much content that, like, good luck. Good luck consuming all of it.
Dude. Every single day we're dropping something. I know there's a lot of people that have an alarm scheduled for the end of 7 days. They're going to discontinue that, cancel that credit card. Go ahead, try it if you want. Patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Joining us today is Alexandra. Alexandra, for the audience who might not be familiar with you, where can they find your work, and what is it that you focus on?
You can find me at justtheinserts.com, and my title isn't as creative because it's basically just manufacture inserts. So I cover all kinds of pharmaceuticals. I go onto the FDA website and I pull the manufacturer inserts for all the medical products on the market, and I teach you how to find them and then read them. What is the manufacturer? What is the federal government saying about this product so that you can make a more informed medical decision? When I was first starting to research inserts and medical products, it was just very overwhelming. So I've taken it into aesthetically pleasing, digestible chunks. So then you can go, no matter your background, no matter your educational level, that you can go make the best decisions for you and your family.
Incredible. I just want to say, you must be the FDA's favorite person. That's exactly what they want, is somebody helping people to understand all the things that they obfuscate purposely.
I get censored quite a bit. Before a lot of the mandates happened, I was deleted off Instagram for sharing .gov information. But hopefully going forward, it'll be a little bit better.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I'm sure that you must just be smitten by RFK Jr.'s what would we say? Confirmation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's in. And from what I've read already, he is doing a number of things, like just researching. Well, he's looking into disease. He's looking. I don't even know if I want to say these words at this point in the show. He's looking.
Well, wait.
Into everything.
Can I tell the audience about that real quick? Just so you guys know, we're working on keeping these half-an-hour previews up on YouTube, so at least YouTube gets something. But because of that, we have to dance around the language, which is what's going on with Top right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I'm not very swift with words right now, because all of my words are buzzwords that get me banned from everything. So I'm like, what? I haven't practiced any of the good words. But he's certainly just running through and looking at this stuff. What do you think about what's going on?
I'm thrilled. And what I think most people, a lot of the controversy that you saw is that people assumed things of him without actually listening to what he had to say. And I saw that consistently on social media, and then listening to different legislators. I didn't sleep very well the entire confirmation process because there was just so much information at such a quick pace that it was hard to filter through it all. So I actually did a 4-part series of all of the concerns that people had about his confirmation. And I addressed every single one because some of them were valid. Some of them were yes, it's okay to ask questions about the people that are going to be at the federal level that will be executing trillions of dollars of taxpayer money on the health of the future of America. So I was really excited that there were so many people that were passionate about getting the right person in there, but most of the information that they were receiving was wrong. And it was easily refuted by a simple podcast interview that he had done or a statement that he had done on his own website during his presidential campaign. So I was working overtime to try to combat a lot of that. And I think what some people assumed is that he was influencing people from the top down and was sharing his research and things that he had come across throughout his decades, years in the legal practice. But what most people didn't understand is that it was mothers, it was parents, it was nurses, it was doctors, it was people that were seeing through their own lived experience a problem, and they wanted someone to help them with a solution. And that was the most important part of the whole process of the confirmation. All the people calling. I mean, there were phone lines that were down in several of the lawmakers' offices. They were getting, I think, 600 calls a minute in those final days before the vote. And I live outside of Washington, D.C., so I have a few friends that are in those circles, and they said they had never seen anything like this for any cabinet member nominee ever, probably in the history of America. So the fact that so many people were rallying behind them wasn't necessarily that he was the savior that was finally going to save us all. It was that we all know that there's a problem, and finally we have hope that maybe the people at the top will start helping us in the solution.
The problem becomes really multifaceted, right? Because it's not just, I mean, it's great that he's looking into the food. I mean, that's a huge problem. We have an obesity epidemic in the United States, and we have a disproportionate amount of morbidly obese homeless people, which is like insane that those two things could even go together. It's a backward society that we find ourselves in now, and it's not just the food. We've got a lot of unpacking to do. You know, I get excited when I hear talks about removing fluoride from the water. I mean, this was something that conspiracy theorists were ridiculed about for years, that was anything to be concerned about. And somehow it's just there for, what is it, the benefit of our teeth? I don't even know what the conventional answer was.
It's to keep
back
your,
in the day.
Keep your third eye calcified, I think.
Calcified.
Is what they're saying.
Calcified pineal gland. That's what my husband says.
Exactly. So, I mean, he's got his work cut out for him. And I don't typically rally behind an individual, especially a politician,
especially a Kennedy.
Especially a Kennedy. Great point. Yeah. But I am optimistic. It doesn't mean that I have to follow the guy to the ends of the earth. I'm optimistic, and I do feel like we're going to turn a corner soon as an entire country. Do you think that that's what's going to happen, or are you skeptical about where we're going?
I think the first year is going to be rough. I have cautious optimism, and I think that we need to not just blindly, like you said, trust anyone. We need to keep that pressure on and that accountability, because I'm sure he's getting hit from so many different angles. I was in the I was a Air Force officer for 5 years. I worked in the bureaucratic federal government for that time. I know how sticky that can be. I know people, civilians that had gone from administration to administration, and they know how to play the game, and they know how to placate certain politicians that are only going to be there for a certain amount of time and then, you know, go back to what they want to do. So I think he's going to have a lot of trouble with that. And I think we need to help him keep that pressure on to hold the government accountable and hold President Trump accountable, because he made a lot of promises in his campaign, and we need to make sure that we're staying active and not just kind of outsourcing that responsibility to Secretary Kennedy. We need to stay active. And I think he's going to help in the aspect of making everything he keeps saying over and over again, radical transparency. That's what we need as Americans, and also for us to pressure at the state level to take that information, that raw data that he's going to release, hopefully within HHS, the CDC, and FDA, that we've been clamoring for years, and then use that to implement I'm trying to be careful with my words, legislation that will honor informed consent at the state level, because there is no currently wide sweeping mandate at the federal level. It's all within the state level. And so to be able to have those fact-based discussions with our lawmakers and to be able to cite .gov resources is going to be so empowering for us as American citizens. So I do have that cautious optimism. I think there's going to be a lot of heat. It's going to be really, really sticky and hard and messy the first year, but hopefully we'll get over that hump and then start seeing a lot of changes.
Well, something that I've seen, we have one friend that is very close to what you're talking about here, as far as the administration that RFK is building in DC right now. And I have another friend that would be this one's manager, like at a higher level. And I wanted him on the show, and he's like, just wait a couple of weeks. He's like, we're waiting to see how this all plays out. I don't want to say anything before it gets out of hand. And one of the last things he told me, I can give you his name in the private chat as well, because I feel like maybe this might help you a little bit, but it seems like there were levels of people stopping. They were stopping RFK at certain levels. And one of the levels would have been being confirmed. And we saw the pushback that he got. I think it was right along partisan lines. Was JD Vance involved in the approval?
No, he was in Paris, actually. And that actually gave me some optimism that he stayed in Paris, because if they were worried about the vote, he probably would have come back. So thankfully, I do agree there would have been some concern, but he wasn't part of the vote.
Okay, so it was basically all Republicans voted yes. Almost all Democrats voted no, which is just insane. But it's even deeper than that. So that's the first line that they were trying to stop him at, and it seems like they gave up on that line. And the last I spoke to this guy, I'll tell you his name after, he said that it seems like people are on the inside and they want to affect who he puts in charge once he is in. And this guy specifically is a whistleblower for what happened in the 2020s. And we all remember what happened in the 2020s. And I think he was going to be put in charge of some sort of accountability for that. It doesn't seem like he's getting in. Our other friend doesn't seem like they're moving to DC. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. Do you have any insight there?
Not that I can, obviously this is all subjective and just things that I, from my own personal experience working within the National Capital Region, there are definitely politics that happen in any branch of government, and the executive branch is not immune to that. And so I don't have any insight into the transition team. I don't have any knowledge of the intricacies of the inner workings and the people that are going to be placed in certain areas. But what I would assume from my own experience is that there's probably being trade-offs, and there's probably some very calculated moves and maybe some long-term goals or phases that are going to be implemented. And, I don't think most people understand that for a federal worker, it is very hard to let them go. You have to go through a very thorough process, more so than in the private sector. I myself have had employees that straight up didn't show up to work, but I still had to go through this huge HR process in order to let them go. So there's probably going to be an element to that. And I know that, and then this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of the government or anything like that, but I think that's probably where the force to go into office instead of doing remote work, that might be kind of a filtering process. The offer that was given to them to have a severance pay, which was it was crazy the amount of severance pay that they offered. So I think that is probably a tool that they're using to get the people that are just knowing that it's going to be a fight for the next 4 years and maybe kind of pick them out up front. But I don't know if you saw, he finally spoke to HHS, I believe it was on Tuesday, and the reception he received was actually pretty encouraging. There were happy faces. People wanted to get pictures with him. They were really excited. So that gives me hope. And then I can't remember what I was listening to, but I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about how at the CDC, I believe actually it was Del Bigtree, he did his MAHA conference after Secretary Kennedy was confirmed, and Del Bigtree was no longer associated with him for his campaign. And he did this great conference for like an hour and a half. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's incredible. It's on X. But he talked about how when they had met with certain people in CDC and FDA, most of them have tried to do what Secretary Kennedy wants to do, but they just they didn't have the power to do it, or they kept getting roadblocks and they weren't able to finally do it. So hopefully, because he has been so clear about his intentions and because he has pretty much all of America behind him, hopefully he'll be able to accomplish it, but it won't be easy.
It's wild to me that seemingly the entire Democratic Party is trying to resist him in one way or another. And it seems like what we're about to be doing is bringing people to health and wellness while they're kicking and screaming. It just doesn't. It's a weird thing because I wouldn't imagine that what he is railing against was ever a party line issue. Right. It's about health and when did your own health as a sovereign individual become a political talking point? It's bizarre.
It's really, so I'm an independent. I don't fully align with either political party. But I probably lean a little bit more conservative in just like economic and free market, and actually probably more libertarian. I'm a little bit of everything. But based on my DMs and based on my comment section, the Democratic Party is hemorrhaging people because of the stance that they're taking on this Make America Health Again movement. The fact that they are making it so political and they are being so vicious about it, they are losing a huge percentage of their base, just from my own anecdotal experience talking with people. I mean, I've had people that have been Bernie bros for their entire life, and now they are no longer because of the way Senator Sanders interrogated Secretary Kennedy. And I don't know if you saw the onesies that he was
Great
pretty
onesies.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I think they actually sold out shortly afterward.
They're selling onesies? I missed that.
Yeah, he pointed out these onesies from Children's Health Defense, and he was like, "Do you support these onesies?" And it was very meme worthy. But I think they might have overplayed their hand in how loyal some of their constituents are, so they might see some backlash for
it's funny because during the lockdowns, the political weight was on the other side of the aisle, in that there you go.
So it says unV'd, unafraid, no V, no problem. He's like, "Are you selling these, sir? Are these on your website?"
I am once again asking if you are supporting these onesies. So I mean, during the lockdowns, it was, once again, they politicized the health of American civilians, but it was kind of the other way, or at least the energy was the other way, right? It was a lot of the left shaming the right because the right wasn't trusting the science or whatever the case may be. And now we're seeing a very similar topic, right, in regards to our own health and nutrition. But there's a falling away, and now the energy, the pushback is coming from the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, so many of them have whiplash. They're like, wait a second, this was what we rallied against, and then now all of a sudden it's demonized because it's not the right person saying it. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit more of unproductive conversation and kind of getting to the root of the problem. Do you really care about health if you're so upset about who's the person that's leading the charge? And actually, Dell, during his speech, he quoted a CEO, and they were saying, "You will get so much farther in your mission as long as you don't care who gets the credit." And I kind of butchered that saying, but it's such a beautiful saying. And I see that in a lot of the Maha movement, some infighting that might happen. And it really just comes down to ego. And it's like, guys, drop the ego out the door. This is America's health. This is our children. It doesn't matter who gets the credit.
Well, it's to be David, expected. We're dealing with some really big personalities.
David, I think I'm just gonna cut the stream now to everywhere because I'm done doing this. We're gonna talk freely. So
done tiptoeing.
Yeah, you could join the Patreon.
Guys, go over to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Continue watching along over there. Otherwise, this conversation is a little bit too dangerous for YouTube, so we got to go.
It's funny, like she's one of the most physically unimposing guests that we've had. She's just like, but I'm like the super dangerous
one of the
topic.
most dangerous.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, she's like packing hand grenades. Okay, so we're off. We're only on StreamYard now, and we can speak freely. I was gonna disagree with you. I don't think that it's ego. It's directly money. I think that Bernie Sanders got caught with his pants down, and when he was deposing RFK, it seemed more like he was exposing himself.
Yes.
So he's pointing at these onesies with the and all this stuff, and he's asking him about this. And Senator Warren as well. Turns out they're taking a ton of money from big pharma and other places like this. And it's just like, man, I wish that this was along party lines, that this was just about the vote and just about political parties, but it's about money. So they're showing us that they don't really care if our kids get sick, hurt, die, that remains to be seen as well. What do you think about that? What do we do with these people?
I was actually really encouraged when I saw all that, because they said the quiet part out loud finally. And it was finally wasn't a conspiracy. It was finally that, okay, they addressed it. And when RFK addressed Bernie and said, the issue of financial conflicts of interest isn't just within the government, it's within the politicians too, or within HHS, it's within Congress as well. And then Bernie said, well, he fought back on just the semantics of it. And he said, well, it's actually employees, it's pharmaceutical employees that provide donations, not pharmaceutical companies. Okay, but any pharmaceutical employee is going to want to protect job security and make sure that they're preserving the livelihood and the ability to pay their mortgage and put food on the table. So if a pharmaceutical employee is giving you money, it's not rocket science to assume that they want you to protect their interests in the pharmaceutical industry. So that to me was great. I'm glad that they did that, because now it was finally out in the open and it was actually on record, and it was something that we can reference back to continually. And I was so encouraged, because if you go and look at the X comments or Instagram comments or social media or YouTube or anything like that of those videos, I mean, he was getting attacked, and people were finally waking up and saying, you know what, my crazy aunt said this, but I can't believe it was actually confirmed.
That's the worst part about doing what we do, is that we have our suspicions, and they're more than suspicions. They're grounded in evidence that other people are unwilling to look at to whatever degree. And we hold on to them. We develop these ideas. We come to conclusions. We try to espouse them and say, hey, this might be what's going on. And it's only until some governing body officially recognizes it all these years down the line that we become vindicated in some way, shape, or form. But it's like, of what value is the vindication? This conversation was being had long before some governing body saw fit to, concede that this thing is true. And that's all these years that it could have been addressed. And so I just see that happen over and over again with an endless amount of topics.
It's so frustrating and I try to be patient with the people that are just now waking up. But, I have a kid that he had a lump on his leg for a while, and he was nonverbal for over 2 years of his life. We came out to Florida. We heavy metal detoxed him, among other things. Got him speech therapy. We actually had a speech therapist in New York City, where I was from, and she would show up with a mask on her face to teach him how to speak. So he's not even I mean, I could wrap my hands around this person's neck, but I was just like, okay, we have to leave. But the damage has been done, and now I sit back here and they go, oh my God, did you see what Bernie Sanders says, or what Elizabeth Warren said? Like, her admission to RFK was basically that these pharmaceutical companies or the manufacturers will now be allowed to be sued because he'll be printing or publishing data through the NIH that will prove that these things are dangerous. And I was like,
yeah.
What's the problem?
I haven't slept because of so many people finally asking questions, and they're finally have intellectual curiosity to either discredit what they're being told, or to, okay, now this has some light bulbs have gone off. So what else am I missing? And so I'm trying to capture all of these people that are finally asking questions for the first time in their lives, and realizing that maybe the people that they trusted and outsourced their responsibility and authority to don't necessarily have their best interest at heart. Or if they do have their best interest at heart, that they themselves have been misled. I've taken CDC training. I've I've talked to doctors and pharmacists and all of these other people, and they show me what's in their textbooks, and it is not anything what I teach and how you can actually find and read manufacturer inserts. I was talking to a pharmacist and she said, we don't even read inserts. We go to immunize.org, which is funded by pharmaceutical companies.
Yep. Well, it's
So
the same
they're
thing
not
that we were
even-
getting during the lockdowns, right? Where it's like there's all these different articles or broadcasts coming out on CNN about how you can go out and partake in the Black Lives Matter protest, but certainly don't go out and partake in any sort of COVID lockdown protests. And we'll be back after this commercial break, brought to you by Pfizer. And it's
Dude,
like,
you remember when Chris Cuomo, I mean, this is not necessarily related to the health field, but I remember vividly when this dude said, yeah, we have the laptop. I think it was the Hunter Biden laptop. He's like, but it has government documents, or some government documents were disclosed, and we're not supposed to look at them, but we'll look at them for you, and we'll distribute. And you just look at what we said, and that's all you need to know. And people bought this. It's incredible, man.
Yeah, we've been programmed really exceptionally well in this country in regards to kind of just following the leader. We get Pied Piper down a trail, and we have our experts, right? It's amazing that we popularize this terminology like trust the science, and you watch that fall apart in real time when Fauci is up there and he's saying, an attack on Anthony Fauci is an attack on science, or whatever the hell he said. And it's like, yeah, you're not talking about a field of study. You're talking about an idol of sorts, something that you look to with faith. And that's what you do when you look to the medical apparatus. I wonder what you found then, Alexandra, because you mentioned that you look through these various pharmaceuticals and you try to unpack them for people. Many of us here in I don't know, Conspiracyville suspect that many of these things are overprescribed, wrongly prescribed, and also even if the diagnosis and the prescription was accurate, the plethora of side effects that come with this prescription will also oftentimes lead to you needing to lean on another prescription for whatever side effects. And it becomes this cascading, snowballing effect. And next thing you know, you're taking a fistful of pills every morning just to combat all the various side effects. I mean, you were somebody who's intimately looking at these things. What do we now glean from the pharmaceutical companies and our relationships with these diagnoses?
Well, I don't even really think you need to be in Conspiracyville to address this, because 99.9% of what I look at and what I cite is from the government. It's .gov resources. And when I first started researching, I actually would consider myself at that time more. And now I don't really subscribe to pro or anti-vax because I think the terms are subjective and there's not an agreed upon definition. But when my mom first started sharing information with me, I thought she was crazy. I thought she had jumped off the deep end. And it was because of her sharing information that I actually went to the .gov resources to prove her wrong. And then I realized, oh crap, I'm the one that's wrong. I'm the one that is emotionally defending an industry and products that I have no clue about. I had never done any research, and yet I thought that they were God's gift to humanity, and that it was me not fulfilling my civic duty by not accepting these products. And so by reading the inserts and realizing the little parts that have been cherry picked over at large by the medical and scientific communities from our .gov resources, that's it for me. You don't need to go any deeper than that. I actually just traveled back from Michigan. I was asked to speak at Hillsdale College in Michigan on Tuesday to some college kids. And I love that they are passionate about this topic, because obviously they went through the golden years of their life, high school and college, during the COVID craziness. And they saw firsthand how corrupt it can be. And so now they don't trust anything. So they're looking for all of this information. And I was talking with a lot of them, and I ended up taking the chickenpox, and we went through the insert together and we looked at different parts of the. And there's sections in the description section in section 11 where they go over ingredients. It talks about how there's fragments of DNA from human DNA and from animal DNA that's in the. And so for them, it was mind blowing, because they had heard some conspiratorials talk about potentially having that DNA, but for the manufacturer to actually list it and it be on the FDA website. Another thing is there was a woman that was in the audience, and she's, self-admitted, called herself, And she was like, but what about pertussis? And what about all these rates that we're seeing? And I brought up, or I referenced the section of the DTaP, that's the for diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis.
That's the one that hurt my son, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, oh man, I could talk forever about that one. But in the mechanism of action section, it says that the metric to determine immunity to pertussis is unknown. So how do we know that this provides immunity when the metric to define it is unknown and it's in the insert? And then, and another part of the DTaP insert, it says under the adverse reaction section that sudden infant death syndrome is a known potential adverse reaction. And it actually says sudden infant death syndrome. If you go to the InfraReds insert, page 11, I have it cited on my website. The last words in the adverse reaction section is SIDS. And that product is administered to babies at 2, 4, and 6 months old, which according to the NIH is the highest rate of SIDS.
That's insane. Even that diagnosis, by the way, SIDS, is like, what does that mean? It's just a medical terminology to, I don't know, soften the blow of losing your child.
Right. If you scroll up and go to the InfraReds, where it says under trade name, and you click InfraReds right there, and then you scroll. I believe it's page 11 on the document, but page 12 on the PDF. It should be that bottom one.
Yeah, let's check that out because I need to see that. This is
right there. Sudden infant death syndrome.
Wow. There it is.
Yep. And according to the CDC, the definition of an adverse reaction is an undesirable medical condition known to be caused by and that's sitting in the adverse reaction section.
They put these things in their own text and it's available to the public. And I guess what they're banking on is the fact that none of us will actually go and read these things. That's a theme that actually keeps popping up on this show. And that's something that I'm guilty of myself read the fine print, right? How many times do we agree to terms and service we don't read? But when we were in the middle of the lockdowns, there came across my, awareness, this idea that we were violating the Nuremberg Code of Ethics. And so I don't know, at the time I didn't know what the Nuremberg Code of Ethics was, and I didn't know necessarily how to find out if we were, but, the segment in particular they were talking about, I think it was actually the very first rule or whatever you would call it. It was that you can't compel or force experimental medical treatments on a society. And so I held on to that word, right? This idea of like experimental, right? Because it's like everything, the definition of everything is actually quite important. And so when you go and you look at, I believe they were studying the mRNA vaccination at Princeton. And if you go and look at the papers, there's all kinds of studies that are released from it. And it's like, I don't know how to discern what I'm looking at. I'm not somebody who went to school for this sort of thing, but I did remember that thankfully for people like me, oftentimes these studies will have a summary at the end, and so if you don't know what you're looking at, you could always go to the last paragraph and see kind of what the entire summary of what they found was. And it tells you right there in the paperwork that there's just no long-term, because of the nature of it being so new, there's no long-term studies, right? They don't have any long-term data for this mRNA vaccination. And so that means by definition, because there's still information that's out to the jury, it is experimental. And so that's a simple little thing. That's all I did was I went and looked at that thing and I said, well, technically, got you on a technicality. It looks like we're violating the Nuremberg Code of Ethics right here, based off of the fact that this is an experimental medication or medical intervention that we are compelling a populace to take. So right there, the very first rule was, and so what I'm trying to get at is these things are, they're there. They write them down. They're there for you. You can go and find these things yourself, but I think they're kind of banking on you won't.
Right. Well, in the National Childhood Vaccination Act of 1986, I actually put this in my free training course and in my book because I think it's really important to understand that manufacturers aren't liable for serious injury or death caused by the products. And within that legislation, it says that they cannot be held liable because they provide the known adverse reactions in the labeling. So they're saying, okay, well, we put it in the labeling, so it's on you that you didn't go and read it. And so that's why I try so hard to take something, because I know what it's like when you first start reading and you're just scrolling through all these pages of text and it's medical jargon and you don't understand it. And it's really overwhelming. And I don't have a medical degree, so I understand if you're looking at an insert and it has all of these medical terms and you're like, what the heck is this? I don't know how many times I've had to copy and paste straight from the insert and go into my search engine and figure out, oh, okay, well, that's hives. Okay, that's fainting. That's swelling. And I've gotten better now that I've done it so many times that I can see it. But it's not accessible to the public. It's not accessible to you and me or people that aren't trained in this information. And so to me, I think that's a failure of public education. I think that's a failure of the medical community, that they have this expertise in something and they are not properly ensuring that the patients and parents that accept these products are fully informed of the known potential adverse reactions. And I have a little bit of grace for them because they themselves aren't even taught about inserts. So how can they teach their patients if they don't even know? And I know that's true because I have so many medical professionals that message me and say, I had no clue. I've had one woman, she's worked in a hospital for decades. And she said, I didn't even know inserts existed because whenever she receives a medication, the box that it comes in is that small box of the medication where the insert is actually given in the bulk box at the pharmacy. So the pharmacist gets that little folded up pieces of paper, but when it gets dispersed to all the different parts of the hospital, the small boxes don't have the insert. So she had no clue.
It almost feels, I understand having empathy just for people in general, and certainly you pay all this money, you go through this schooling. The last thing that you want to do after you're paid off your debt and you finally have a good career is start turning around and scrutinizing the apparatus that you're now a part of. But it almost feels nefarious just in the sense of like the language that these things are written in is rife with legalese, right? The terminology is such that it almost feels purposely convoluted. And that could just be me being bitter because I don't want to admit that I'm too dumb to understand these things. Right? I don't want to be like, I'm too stupid to understand it.
The truth of the matter is,
on the other side, though, what are they telling you? They're making it difficult to understand, and then they're telling you trust the science. You can understand it. Leave it to the professionals. That to me feels nefarious.
Here's what's really going on. So since my child was kind of like damaged, my wife, who is an RN, she's been an RN for probably 12 years now. So she's very familiar with this stuff. And in the doctor's office and in the ER, the RNs kind of do the job of the doctors. The doctors don't really do so she knows all of these terms. And she's looking through, she's looking through these inserts again, and she's doing what you're doing. She's like, I have to Google this because I don't even know this. Some of these terms weren't brought up in nursing school. And they did, 2 years of intense nursing school, and then they have clinicals. They have to pass their NCLEX. There's a lot that goes into it. And she's like, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. But what it is this is a conspiracy show. And I will just say, are you familiar with the vampire rule? Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Okay. If any vampire novel, whether it be, I don't know, Nosferatu or Twilight, the rule is that you have to let them in. So they can't just come into your house and bite your neck. They knock. And once they're invited in, the consent is given. Then they could, and this is an age-old theme of, we've told you. So now that you know, to whatever level which I don't think people really know, but, they have the right of saying, we've told you. So now we're allowed to suck your until you're just dry bones and dead.
Well, that's what a lot of hospitals, you going to that hospital is implied consent to adhere to all the hospital policies. So I have a friend, they are actually, it's a podcast. They have two RNs and they both collectively have decades of experience, and they both have left the field because they just couldn't be a part of it anymore. And she was telling me about best practices and order sets that are done in the hospital environment, and how there are some patients that would come out of heart surgery, and because they chose to have heart surgery at that hospital, there could be a possibility that they would be vaccinated without even being told.
Oh.
And that to me is just completely bonkers, violates informed consent at its very core. Yes, especially just coming out of surgery. And I don't know, hundreds to thousands of people have messaged me saying, well, my baby was in the nurse area because I needed to get some sleep. And then I got my hospital records, or I was charged by my insurance company and found out that they ended up getting these. and we didn't even say it. Or I've had nurses that are in labor and delivery, and the mother and father say, okay, we don't want these products. And then if that baby is somehow transferred to the NICU, that declination doesn't transfer over to the NICU. So the parents don't realize that they have to retell the NICU nurses that they don't want that product.
See, and that's where it comes down to all these like layers of consent. Like you have opportunities to consent, and not saying no is kind of saying yes. That's the way that these things are interpreted. You have to actually vocalize.
My son was born in March of 2020, and this is right when the world shut down in New York City. There was
what a month to be born.
Yeah,
horrible. I feel bad for this kid. It's like, it's not his fault. You were born at the end of the world. But there was actually like a debate on whether I would be allowed in the hospital room or be allowed to even be there. That it was that time period, and after she had given birth, it was an insane process, and it was the craziest time in my life. We're in the hospital, and we had to stay there for a couple of days because he had jaundice. So like on the first or second day, they're like, oh, we're gonna take him and just take a look at him, and they bring him out the room, and we're tired. Like we've been with this kid, and we just you know how it is. You went through the whole process, and my wife just goes, just go walk down the hallway, please, and just go check. And I go down the hallway and I look through the glass, and they're putting a needle in his leg, and I freak out. Like bust in the door. I was like, what the f are you doing? Yeah. And it turned out they were giving him vitamin K, but they were also setting up to give him the next one, like a hepatitis, Hep B shot. And I was like, absolutely not. We told you no. And from then on, they gave the baby back.
Oh, and they treat you like villains.
They treat us, they just every time they came in, they're like, is he latching? And we're like, well, not really. And they're like, well, have you considered the Hep B shot? And I was like, what the f is wrong with you guys?
It's horrible. It's so horrible. And then probably too, I don't know if you know this or not. So my daughter was by the synthetic vitamin K. And she was severely jaundiced, colic. She had neonatal acne, eczema. And after she was born, and she would be in digestive turmoil every time she fed, I remember going to pediatricians asking for help, and the entire time they're shaming me for not giving her the Hep B. Yeah. And they don't even want to talk about the colic baby sitting on my lap and me completely sleep deprived, trying to figure out how to heal her. And I remember thinking, are you a salesperson?
That's exactly what it is, because they're worried about what they can charge you with. That's what it is at the end of the day.
Well, and then so finally, I mean, I'll be honest, that was the last pediatrician I went to was when she was, I don't know, 4 months old, and I never have gone back. I found a family doctor that she was actually a pediatrician for 10 years, and then her nephew experienced an adverse reaction, and she couldn't be a part of it anymore, and so she developed a family medicine practice, and so I go to her. But it forced me to leave the industry and to leave that world. And I actually have plenty of people that say I can't find a pediatrician that will let me do a delayed schedule, not even saying that they won't do it at all, but won't even let them do a delayed schedule. And I have to be honest with them and say, look, most pediatricians, if they're board certified, they have to recommend the CDC schedule. They are bound by their business model because they are supported by insurance claims, and they have to pay for the people in their office to file all these claims. They're not going to let you do a delayed schedule. They're not going to let you not accept, because their business will fail. And so sometimes you have to go somewhere else. And now I will say there are some pediatricians that are going to a more direct primary care model where they do membership based, and they will be a little bit more lenient. I'm actually working on a pro-informed consent provider directory, and I found that if there are pediatricians listed, most likely they are they have a different business model than most conventional pediatricians do.
Well,
it's corrupt. It's corrupt down to every level, and they control it with the financials. Sorry, I got to ask you a question, and it might be early to ask you this question, but okay, so RFK goes in, he revamps the National Institute of Health, the CDC, and now these directives are that we're going to these doctors are going to be different, or at least they're not going to be enforced as stringently. It still begs the question, what do I do with these people who have hurt our children for so long, and knowingly or not, I don't care. You have taken this degree, you put this little white coat on, and you walked around with this air of confidence that you are who you are. So you know what you know. Great. You were wrong. What do we do with you? There has to be a form of consequence. There has to be a punishment. And listen, the extreme side of punishment would be, like, but the more
Have you been talking to my husband?
I'm sorry.
A lot of us are feeling that sentiment.
Yeah,
a lot of us.
This is what I talk to my wife about often. I was like, when all this stuff comes down and it's revealed the kind of damage that was done and the pushing that these people did of these narratives, people are going to be really mad. And
I would hope.
But what do you do with these people?
Here's the issue.
Take away their license, because then you have no doctors.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of doctors out there. They're just not within the conventional healthcare model. But here's the issue, and this is something that I was so vocal about when COVID first happened and the emergency use authorization. I fought so hard for that not to happen because it put into play a protective measure of all of the medical professionals that partook in administering, recommending all of those things. That product, it protected them from any kind of legal action, from any kind of malpractice. So because of that, legally, there's really not a lot that I could see RFK being able to do. Now, maybe there's a loophole that I mean, he's a lawyer. He has plenty very smart, intelligent people around him. Maybe it is really interesting that there was a pardon, a preemptive pardon for Anthony Fauci. That I don't think has ever happened for a medical doctor in the history of the United States. So I don't know how all that's going to play out. I think it'll be very, very interesting, but I don't think that RFK is going to start out the gate with that if he ever does do that, because there are so many people that are on the fence, or so many people that are still, the psychology of that time frame still has a hold on them. I mean, there was $1 trillion campaigns funded by taxpayer dollars to convince people to accept this product and to shame people that didn't accept this product. I mean, you had neighbors and family members calling on other family members, and people were pitted against each other. Like it was psychological warfare. And it's only been a couple years, or 4 or 5 years since then. That's actually not a long time. Exactly. That's not a long time from that happening. And most of us, like you, became parents during that time frame. I have 3 kids. My first child was born in mid 2019, and so I dealt with her injury, and then by the time that she finally started to have some healing, COVID hit, and then the world shut down and everybody went crazy. And then I was actually pregnant when the mandates happened. And I remember being on the pregnancy apps and seeing women skipping prenatal appointments because their providers were pushing the COVID so hard on them and telling them that they were going to die, their baby was going to die, and that they were putting everybody at risk by not accepting the COVID. So I think because we've gone through such a mental just trauma for the last few years, it's going to take some people a little bit more time to unravel everything that happened in order to have that public support of holding people accountable that need to be held accountable.
I think it's going to be the same thing, though. It's like we need some governing body to tell us that we were right, because when it comes to the vaccinations, VAERS is underreported to whatever magnitude that it's underreported. And there was a lot of obfuscation in regards to attributing cardiac events that may have been from the vaccination, but it seems that they were trying to attribute it to every other thing. There was cardiac events associated with climate change. They were trying to associate it with climate change. They were saying that at a point they were even saying eggs were responsible for a great deal of cardiovascular issues within young adults. We were having unprecedented, events in regards to athletes dropping dead on the having these cardiac events on the field, especially in regards to soccer players. But there was a lot of obfuscation. It became very hard to attribute that to the vaccination. What wasn't really obfuscated was the idea that they were telling these people that they needed to be put on ventilators, and then the ventilators were actually causing their respiratory systems to shut down. It was because they were becoming codependent on the respirator, allowing it to do the breathing for them. And so whatever natural process that would have been in place instead of the respirator shuts down, and these people end up dying. And that was not obfuscated. They weren't attributing respiratory issues to other things. It was it seems like that was a mistake. And people saw that, right? And what I mean to say that they saw is medical professionals telling you that you needed an intervention of some sort, and then that leading to your demise, you actually dying.
Right.
And nobody really gave a shit about that. And so in one way, I look at the vaccination thing and I'm like, man, if all the information came out that they were telling us to do this and it was, blowing up in our faces and hurting us, then yeah, maybe we'd be really upset. We're just waiting for that official, remark from the governing body. But we had that in the ventilators and nobody seemed to give a shit.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it is a little bit of a morbid of that Spider-Man meme where the three Spider-Mans are just pointing at each other, because you have the medical professionals that are blaming the government for providing information to them that they went off of, and then you have the medical professionals or the science community that's pointing at the people on the ground saying, well, this is what you were reporting and we were just going off of the data, and then you have the pharmaceutical companies saying, well, you wanted to have or Operation Warp Speed and you wanted to do it really quickly, and so everybody's just blaming each other and not realizing that there was so many levels of corruption, and not necessarily just with the COVID. It's baked into HHS. I mean, I cover this in my course and in my trade in the book. It's the financial conflicts of interest. The entity in CDC, the committee that allows products to be added to the schedule, almost all of them have financial conflicts of waivers, and there's legislation that protects them. It says that if the need for you to be on this committee outweighs the amount of financial conflicts of interest we have, we'll waive that for you. And so it really just exposed generational issues that we've been dealing with since like the 70s and 80s on how these products are brought to market. And I think for me too, this going through COVID, it was a origin of where most people start realizing, oh crap, I saw this happen in real time in COVID. What about polio? What about tetanus? What about all these other diseases that we were told eradicated it? And then they start looking, and that's why I include some important historical context in my training stuff, because how many times do we say but polio but all these other things?
Yes, yeah.
What's the current term now is they're a victim of their own success. People don't want to do it anymore because it eradicated. But then when you look at the history of it and you realize, oh my gosh, the polio was, look up the Cutter incident, look at all, the oral polio that was causing more cases of derived paralytic polio than wild polio. It wasn't a success. It actually caused more harm. And so I kind of very slowly introduce these ideas to people because it can be so overwhelming. And that the example that I give is if I start researching at fact A, and then I go to fact B, and then I go to fact C, all the way down to fact Z, but then I go to someone with fact Q or throw something out there, their brain's going to shut off and they're not going to be able to digest it. And so I come in the angle of, okay, we're going to handhold. We're going to go really slowly. This is all about informed consent, and then slowly disclose, because in order for you to understand a section of it, you have to understand the whole history of it. So you have to be a little bit of a historian. But I do think because we went through this, it made it much more realistic that it could have happened in the past.
There's also this interesting phenomenon that I've been mulling over in my brain of, no matter how many times you walk people through from A through Z, and you do it in a convincing manner, like I can do it. I understand I'm a bit abrasive, but you probably have a much better way of bringing this to people. They will still be resistant to it. But I'm like, what if we took the red dye out of the food? What if we took the fluoride out of your water? Like,
and toothpaste.
Something
Would
is
you
messing
still be
with.
resistant? Is it a matter of calcified pineal glands? Is that what's going on?
It's not just that, but it's like I think it does form, like, it causes a form of mental. Like, if your gut flora is just completely damaged from years and years, and we all are. I am too. I drink soda. I like Coca-Cola, but it's like
unbelievable.
Yeah. Sorry, it's really
we all
good.
have our vices.
Yeah, but there is a connection between your brain and your gut. And our gut has been so poisoned over the years that it's like most of these people that, like, I feel like that might be step one to untying this knot.
Well, so the industry doesn't really look at that, right? And I'm thinking as we're speaking, like I'm going back to like all the really big. I'm very skeptical of the medical industry, and rightfully so, given just this conversation. But if you go back and you look at these big medical moments throughout history, like, okay, cancer, right? Cancer is a huge one. We have so much of our medical apparatus that's built up to fight cancer. And the longer you look at it, the more it looks like maybe they could do something about this, but it almost feels like it's a much more effective money generating machine than it is worth fixing and making it go away, because then all of a sudden your revenue dries up. And it's the same thing with like SSRIs, right? That's another huge thing that's going on in the States, and it's like they're being overprescribed, or at least that's a general consensus. I feel that way. Certainly, we're having these neurological interventions in the brain chemistry of children, right? We're prescribing children various things, Adderall and things like that. Even the AIDS epidemic, you go back to like the whole AZT, Fauci's there too, which is very odd. That really is disheartening when it comes to people's ability to look at history and then see the way in which it repeats, because that wasn't even that long ago. And so there are these really big events, AIDS and our mental health epidemic that we're going through here in the States, and the undefeatable boogeyman that is cancer. And when you look at these things scrutinizingly, you're like, that looks awfully corrupt. Actually, it looks like there was a bunch of shady things happening, a bunch of experimentation on the public when it comes to pushing pharmaceuticals that don't have enough data, but it doesn't matter because it kind of seems like we're their guinea pigs. The biggest events, the mental health crisis, that doesn't seem good. What then can we champion the medical industry for? I mean, so much of our evolution as far as quelling big diseases really was like a sanitation issue, it seems, right? Where you keep your food clean and you keep your hands clean, and that ends up actually dropping the amount of people that are contracting disease by a significant percentage.
To India.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you go and look at a lot of the historical rates of disease, many times the herd immunity was already happening before it came to market, and then and then it introduced a strain, and then all of a sudden cases spiked.
So it's like to me, it looks like an opportune thing. It's like, oh, okay, herd immunity is developing. Let's roll this out. And then we can go back historically and claim that it was, the timing. It looks like it was the vaccination that did it. Well, so I'm just finding a hard time I believe antibiotics are good as a last ditch effort. Like, something you really can't kick if it's not dietary, if it's not getting a little sunlight, staying hydrated, getting some rest, keeping your vitamins up, things like that, eating healthy foods, staying away from things that are causing inflammation. If you can't boot it that way and it is persisting and it's getting worse, then antibiotics are great. But antibiotics are like a low drone throughout history. I'm looking at these big events. Like I said, like AIDS was a big event, and the whole fight against cancer, when it really kicked off, it spiraled into something that's tremendous. There's so many nonprofits that are all geared towards it. It's like there's a whole culture around these things.
Alexandra, with these, do you think that there's something more nefarious than just because if they're not helping, what's in them?
Then what the hell are we doing?
Hey, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, there's so many different conspiracy angles that you could go for, and I think you would have evidence for almost every single one. For me, I personally, when I look at the very critical moments that these are recommended, when a woman becomes pregnant, she first goes to a medical professional to confirm that she's pregnant. So right at the beginning of becoming a parent, you set up that precedent that you have to go to a medical professional to verify what you believe that you are pregnant. And then it sets up that relationship that medical professional has some kind of insight into your body that you don't have. And then throughout the pregnancy, you are being recommended certain products at key points of your pregnancy because there's been a host of research. And I don't want to downgrade it. There's definitely some benefits, like you were saying. If you need that medication or you need that tool, definitely have that available. But in my mind, when a woman is at such a vulnerable part of her transition period between just becoming a girl and kind of becoming a woman and becoming a mother, they are being recommended these products saying, okay, you are a healthy mother. In order to stay healthy, in order for your child to stay healthy, you have to accept this product. And so it starts them right at the get-go. And I believe that a mother's intuition grows throughout her pregnancy, and as the child is born, grows throughout childhood. And so I personally believe that when you set that expectation that a mother, in order to maintain the health of her and her child, that she has to accept this preventative product from the medical professional, it now sets her up for failure later on down the road, where she can't nourish that intuition, because now she has to, okay, your child is dealing with ear infections, your child is dealing with gut issues or an allergy or asthma or all these other things, I have to seek a medical professional now. I am now so dependent, hyper dependent upon this medical professional that there is no way that any other natural remedy that has been used for centuries would ever be good enough, because I need to go to a medical professional. And I see it all the time. I see it within my own circle of influence. I see it in my DMs. I see it in the comments. I see it in so many other science communicators that are preying and are quite predatory towards mothers and towards pregnant women, because they're in this state of growing their intuition and it's being robbed from them. So I see it in that sense. That's where the more nefarious part of, because again, I come from being trained in business. I look at, okay, how does this industry set up lifetime customers? Well, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Is by getting them right when they become mothers and kind of like forcing that pipeline, I guess you could say, for the moms.
You're creating a trauma, right? Like you're taking the mother, inflicting trauma on them at the most vulnerable point in their life, when they have these instincts coming in to protect this little thing that really can't survive on its own. It's nefarious, but it's a genius, because it's just playing off of human nature. It just seems like everything they do is to disrupt not just motherhood, but like the raising of a child. Like if
that motherhood angle is huge too. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing what percentage of revenue to the medical industry comes from childbirth. Something strange has happened.
Oh, have you seen The Business of Being Born?
I believe I have. That was a fantastic documentary.
A really good one.
And anybody who's, had a baby in a hospital, you can feel all of that. Much of what Top was talking about before, it's like they're whisking them away and they're doing things in other rooms, and it's like you feel like they're I don't know, they're treating you like a product instead of a person. And
they don't even, I mean, just to talk about motherhood a little bit, but the reason why C-sections are so high is because they just like can't wait. It's like
they're just trying to, that's what I'm saying. They treat you like a product. They're ready to get you out of that bed and get another body in it. And what's crazy is we've convinced women, and look, I know, like, I'm a man, I'm not capable of giving birth, but I'm a father and I watch this whole process. And to me, it just seems strange.
It's crazy.
Because I go like, I'm like, women have been having babies for, a long time before hospitals were a thing. And now all of a sudden there seems to be this idea here in the West that you can't have a baby without the hospital. And
this is my personal,
really crazy.
Personal experience. My first child was a birthing center attached to a hospital. It was a 44-hour labor, incredibly traumatic. My second and third, I had at home. Easiest labors compared to that. And it was still like, sure, yes, you go through transition. Having a baby naturally is hard and it's painful, but it was way better than that hospital experience.
Because you're comfortable in your own home, surrounded by people that love you and care about you. They're waiting on you. Everything is familiar. Like, the last thing you need to do is go through this traumatic experience in a foreign place. It just adds to another layer of trauma.
Exactly. And at the biological level, a woman, when she is going through labor, there are certain hormones that increase in order to suppress the pain. And there's certain hormones that help the labor progress at a natural level and not as so aggressive as what you would get if you are given Pitocin or something like that. So when you're in a hospital, those hormone secretions can be limited by harsh lights, strangers coming into the room, a whole bunch of machines around you, being in a clinical setting, worrying about blood pressure and hearing the beeping and hearing all these other things.
And they have to come in like every hour on the hour they have to come in. And it's like, you want privacy in that moment. You're in a vulnerable state. Like, even as the husband and the father, I'm in a vulnerable state because I'm trying to protect my wife and my son who's on the way. And there's a never ending cycle of strangers coming through the door and jamming something else in you. And it's as far as an industry goes, a revenue producing, and it is an incredible, what would you call it? It's a scam. It feels like a scam.
The disservice that I've done to my children, my son specifically, is something that I could probably never forgive myself for not knowing this stuff sooner. But like, he was born in like a Twilight Zone episode. Like, he came out, and I mean, this birth was like crazy. Like, she got an epidural, and she got it probably too late because it was COVID time, and all the doctors were terrified. They didn't even really have masks. They were kind of like, in between. It was a time when the masks were like limited or something like that. And when he came out, it was like her blood pressure had dropped. His blood pressure was dropping, and they had the C-section stuff on the table. And luckily her doctor was there, and like I'm holding one of her legs, someone else is holding her legs, and her doctor is pulling the baby out because he's like, no, you're gonna have this baby this way, like we don't have to cut you.
Oh my gosh.
And he comes out and there's like 40 people in the room. They're wearing masks, most of them had masks, and I'm like, this must have been psychotic. Imagine the first thing you do, you come out and you're like, what the is going on in this place?
The medical industry is not alone in this, because if you're paying attention, Hollywood and you know, the movies, and they make childbirth look like the most terrifying. They love dramatizing childbirth. They love showing this you know, scene to women that's like, it's like you're on death's bed. And it's so traumatic, it's so dramatic, you know, there's like intense music playing, everything is suspense. They use all of this Hollywood apparatus to really highlight this moment, and women are inundated with this constantly. And it's like in every good show and every good movie, you'll end up seeing this thing, and to the point where they have successfully solidified it within our culture that this thing happens in a hospital bed. It doesn't happen in your home, that's for certain. You know, we're not animals, we're not hominids. You know, we're doing things in hospitals. We're civilized now, and it's like, maybe you're just you've made an industry where there needn't be one, and you've made it unbelievably profitable.
Yeah, I have a motherhood guide that I wrote for free. It's no email required to access on my website. So anybody is expecting, go read it. It's really, really, really good. And I have lots of resources in it. But I talk about how there are a majority of medical professionals that have never seen a physiological birth. They've never seen a birth that is naturally progressed. And perfect, it's right there. And I go through what a physiological birth, and it's sourced from .gov resources. What does that look like? And what are some questions that you can ask your medical professionals to identify if they maybe don't have that experience? Because most people don't realize OBGYNs are surgeons. And so when you're going to an OBGYN, they're going to lean towards what they know, and they know surgery. And so if you want a more natural minded birth, you have to prepare yourself for a physiological birth. And I talk about too, even if you do need, or you want an epidural, or you want a C-section, birth is completely unpredictable. You could have a C-section scheduled and have your baby in your bathroom. I have 2 friends that have planned on having a hospital birth and ended up having their baby at home. And it was such an incredibly traumatic experience for them, because they didn't know what it looked like. They didn't know how to prepare, because they just were banking on medication to help them with their labor. And then I've had friends that had hospital or home births planned, and then they ended up having a C-section. And so I also cover C-sections and different things that you can do for your baby and your body to make sure that your microbiome is seated for the baby. There's things that you can do. There's things that you can do pre and post-op to help your body recover from a C-section, and make sure that your breast milk isn't dipping after a C-section because you're in pain and you're trying to filter out all, you know, if you had fentanyl or anything like that. So I cover natural hospital births too. There are things, and now it depends on your hospital and it depends on the policy that they have, but there are some things that you can do to have a more natural minded hospital experience. But again, I'm probably more biased towards the home birth, because it felt that my body was in control and it knew what it needed to do. And it was way less painful, way less time. I mean, I was in labor for almost 2 days. I had my midwife, when I came in to the hospital, she went at home, had a full day of leave, and came back, and I was still in labor.
I think that it's one of the worst things about this is the medical industry has reduced childbirth to like a very logistical happening, right? And it's all nuts and bolts. It's all what looks good on paper. And one of the things I hate the most is it seems that it certainly happened to me. It's like after the baby is born, whether it's jaundice or whatever, there's always a reason to whisk it away. And I hate that. It felt so wrong to me in my heart that they're just whisking, you know, my son away to go put him in this thing under a heat lamp. You know, what is that? A heat
I would
lamp
say most RNs that talk to me never, ever, ever leave your baby alone. Always have someone go with the baby, whether it's the dad or the grandma or grandpa or aunt, uncle, friend. Always have someone there.
Even just besides them taking it away, what the medical industry never takes into consideration is this like spiritual moment. There's a connection. There's an immutable bond between, you know, parents and children, especially mothers and their children. And I think that when this baby is born, there's a real, for lack of a better term, magic that needs to take place. That baby needs to be held. There needs to be bonding. You know, you've carried this baby for 9 months and you get this opportunity to hold it in your hands, and instead it's got to go sit in isolation. I don't think that's how babies are supposed to be. Yeah. Rubber gloves under a heat lamp. They're meant to be embraced. They're meant to feel love. I mean, it's the climax of this moment where this you know, body is developing inside of yours. And even though you can never see and touch this thing, you can feel it moving around, and you develop. I watch my wife, you know, develop this love for something that we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's this breakthrough moment, and you're meant to hold that thing and make some eye contact, some meaningful eye contact, and hold that baby and receive it into the world with love. And the industry steps right in the way of that and goes, no love for this baby.
When my son was born, they forced my wife to wear a mask so it's like, I know, dude, it's, I'm trying to think of a word besides like rage. I can't really.
I understand why you're so bitter.
Yes. Rage is really the word. It feels horrifying because I remember the feeling when I was in the hospital of it's like me versus them suddenly, because, you know, you're reduced to a real primal state when you're with the person that you love and they just went through this traumatic experience. And now you've got this vulnerable child that needs your protection. Yeah. And because of that dynamic and the way that these medical professionals are behaving, it very much becomes an adversarial dynamic where I'm, what are you doing? Where are you going? Why is this happening? What are you doing with that? Well, you know, it's
and also as the father, you not only feel that towards the baby, but also towards your wife or, you know, your partner. And you were talking about the baby and the importance of the baby having that connection, but also for the mother, in order for her placenta to be delivered naturally and in order for her milk production to start happening. And there are afterbirth pains that she's going to experience. The baby being in close proximity to her gets those hormones working and helps her in her healing. There's when the placenta comes out, there's a wound the size of a dinner plate inside of her because the placenta is no longer attached to her uterus. And so you need all of that. That is such a critical amount of time where all of that needs to be taken care of. The newborn screening can wait. There is nothing that needs to be done immediately in that amount of time that is more important than that bondage to first happen for just the biological level of things.
My wife was in labor for 24 hours, and because of that, like, churn and burn kind of effect, they insisted, like, we need a C-section. It needs to happen. And I don't know. We're just like, okay, I guess it needs to happen. Sure. And so, you know, she's wheeled away. We go through the C-section. I'm there holding her hand, and, you know, they take the baby out, and I get to hold him for a little bit. And I look around and realize they've wheeled my wife out without saying anything. And I don't know where she is. And I'm there with my father and her mother. So I pass my son off to my father, and I'm going back to the room we were originally in to find my wife. And sure enough, she's in there. She's alone. The lights are off. And she's just shaking in the dark because she's just had this massive surgery, and she's in shock from all of this. And, you know, if you really ever have injured yourself like terribly, there's a kind of a convulsion and so she's just convulsing alone in the dark by herself. And I have to go over there and hold her. And you know, I didn't even have, it's so foreign. It's such a mess, man. It's such a mess. Like, this shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't be passing my baby off and going to console my wife.
The question again is, like we discussed, like, what do you do with these people? Are they redeemable, these doctors? Because like you said, there are a lot of doctors out there. Like, when my wife, we moved here, she got really sick. She had Lyme disease. She still has Lyme disease, but we had to go through a bunch of doctors to figure out really what was wrong with her. And that's kind of when she shed the whole RN Western medicine stuff, where she went completely holistic. But there aren't that many. I mean, maybe 10% of doctors that are thinking along the lines of how we're thinking here. But there's a lot of damn people, and they need a lot of doctors. So where do you go?
Well, and I think this is where, like, because I was actually thinking about this earlier, because so many people come to me and they say, well, we're so understaffed and we have all these people coming in. But most of the time, especially with all the inserts that I've read, I think that a big percentage of the issues that we see in hospitals are actually adverse reactions from pharmaceuticals. And so if you gave the public the information, the transparency, and the education to be able to make more informed decisions, and for them to realize, I had this product, I accepted this product, and then I developed this adverse reaction that I had to go seek a 15 specialists for, and then I had an ER visit or blah, blah, blah. Maybe they would make wiser decisions, and then you wouldn't have that many people. To me, I feel like it's going to be a long-term process to fix it at its root cause. And then other times I'm like, it all needs to and we all just need to grow a garden of medicinal herbs. And I have a suture kit at home that I practice in case I need to. I have the butterfly stitches for my son because he's just a hot mess and he falls off the couch all the time, and I know he's going to be the first one that I'm going to have to do stitches on. So sometimes I lean that way, and sometimes like maybe it's we're salvageable and maybe we can replace it. But I think it just really depends. This is why I said this confirmation vote for RFK Jr. was probably the most important vote that we've ever had in our lifetime, because I do think that is going to be, we were at a crossroads and it was either going to be really, really bad, or maybe, just maybe it's going to start getting better.
I think we need a cultural shift, because even if you revamp the medical apparatus, as long as the average person is so easily deceived and taken advantage of, there's going to be those who are going to place themselves in those positions and think about profits over people, and then surely it's going to happen again. We can't lift our heads up from not only our own 9-to-5 grind and worrying about the average thing, but also the propaganda that's been aimed at us is so addicting. Right? It's like we talk about it often. There's like a scene change every 3 to 8 seconds. It's constantly flashing. It's like a brainwashing program that the intelligence agencies would run on you. And until we break off of that, it's like we don't have time to look at these things. And even when we do have time, we're addicted to trash. Yes. We're addicted to bad food. We're addicted to bad media. No, that's all right. There he is, Buzz Lightyear. Hey, it's Buzz.
Okay. I'm almost done, bud.
Awesome.
Okay, can you go in the living room? Sorry.
There you go.
My babysitter cut out on me today, so I had them watching a movie downstairs, and it must have ended.
That's all right. His outfit's very
this
cool.
happens to me once every 3 episodes or so. They just be like, they bust in. He's like, "Hey, the TV's not." And I'm like, I don't know.
I know. It's just, average parenting these days. You just got to do what you got to do.
Well, that's the beauty of doing these things remote, right? It's like we don't have to leave them to do this. But I just think that we don't stand a chance at any sort of real long-term health and nutrition advocacy or awareness as a country until we detach ourselves. So we need both. It's great that we have RFK on the horizon, and I do think a lot of great things are going to happen, but we need to dismantle this propaganda machine, and we need to revamp our entire nutrition system here in the West.
Well, and it's funny how it does seem like it's all happening all at once, right? Again, I like Trump. I think he's hilarious. I'm very suspicious of him. I like Elon Musk. I'm very suspicious of him. But they're dismantling the financial systems like through USAID. So we're seeing that happen at the same time. They're telling us about, Reuters was receiving a couple $1 billion to socially engineer us. It's insane. So while that's happening, we have RFK Jr. coming in, and he's going to be working aspects of this side of the coin. And I think today maybe Kash Patel even will be confirmed as
hopefully, FBI. Yeah, hopefully now.
Yeah, in a couple. Yeah, and I got to check the internet, but all of these things are happening all at once, and it feels like we're about to turn a corner really, really fast. Yeah. I'm not sure people are ready for that.
Well, it's been a blitzkrieg, and I think it's by design.
Yeah, dude, me too.
Well, how else would you do it? Like how you can't roll this out slow because you'd get cut off. It's a war at every single junction of what's ailing us as a society.
Yeah. And I think I was actually reading this book. It's about, because I have a business mindset, and I enjoy marketing, learning about different branding of different companies, and like Liquid Death is probably just fascinating to me. That whole story of like selling water in a can that looks like Monster or something like that. So I was reading this book about it, and it was talking about when you become predictable, you become hackable. And I think that is kind of the mentality that this administration is going for, is that we're just gonna, if you're on a rug, we're gonna pull it, and you're gonna get on a new rug, we're gonna pull that too. And just, he's had 4 years to plan all this out. So I think that's what's happening right now. And it's exhausting for us who are trying to keep up with it and just try to predict it, because it's completely unpredictable.
That expression of like human beings are incredibly adaptable. I wonder, we're gonna find out, because if they change everything that rapidly, and a lot of us do just kind of go with the status quo. So maybe in that way, if the status quo changes for the better, then it'll be beneficial that human beings can be hypnotized in the way that we are so typically hypnotized. And so if I don't know, we're going to see if that adaptability really holds any water,
Right.
or if we're going to have to bring people kicking and screaming into health and nutrition.
It does. It holds water because after COVID, after 2020, I mean, to see the way humanity bounced back in the way that it did, I thought we would never come back from that. People were so damaged just with wearing masks and the propaganda and how they were behaving, and now it's fairly normal. Like you go to New York City and things were sort of, there's still a deep scar, and you're never going to get rid of that. But people recover quickly, man. They're resilient.
Well, and I think they overplayed their hand. I think they expected more people to just blindly follow and for that social engineering to be a little bit more effective. But the people that now are messaging me, almost all of them say COVID woke me up. COVID was the one that got me questioning. The fact that I was living in Michigan and the government said that I couldn't buy gardening seeds because it was dangerous. Like they just completely overplayed it. And I think that it hopefully will be a pivotal point in our history where we woke up and we realized, okay, our government's been lying to us, and there are industries that are protected by the government, and the injuries that are caused by these products are actually paid from taxpayer dollars. So I'm paying for compensation for injury. So you just started unpeeling this onion and realizing, oh my gosh, this is horrible. We cannot let this happen again. This has to end. And that's why I see the most unifying thread to me is informed consent in America. You have people that are young and old and black and white and all these different denominations and all these different faiths and all these different socioeconomic classes that are coming together and say, no more. We're not going to deal with this anymore. We want change. And that's what I think we saw with RFK. And that's why I have so much more hope than I did a year ago, for sure.
I think we are at this pivotal moment, and I want to say, just like, God bless those people that came before us, because there's always been anti-vaxxers, right? And they got besmirched with that label. There's always been those whistleblowers against the medical industry one way or another, and up until recently, this pivotal moment in history, it was very difficult to say those kind of things. You'd be ostracized by, your social circle, but you'd certainly be ridiculed by, it didn't have to be you directly. All you had to do is turn on the TV and watch a news segment on CNN about anti-vaxxers, and you just knew in your heart that they were talking about you.
The winter of death.
There's a lot of people that piped up for a lot of years, and, we're here and we get to have these conversations now, and it feels much easier than what they had to go through. So I do agree with that sentiment. We are more than likely at a pivotal moment in history, and I hope it's for the better. But man, a lot of people got torched on the way here.
It was actually genius the way Trump could have played on his own ego, but by absorbing RFK Jr. into his administration, and not just absorbing him, but then when it came down to the vote, putting pressure on these Republicans to confirm him. He wasn't playing around. He's like, no, this is the guy. This is my guy. And he had no real reason to do that. He could have broken his promise. It was a handshake. Who cares? But he went and he followed through with it. And by doing that, so you had the conservative vote or the MAGA vote, whatever that is, that section of the population. But for the previous 10 years, the media has done a great job at calling Donald Trump this or that, grab him by the pussy sort of thing. So that immediately takes the mother and the female vote away from him. And I think he got that back just by including this guy. And that's females control 80% of the consumer decisions in this country. That's huge.
Yeah.
Is it a good thing that he has this consensus right now? Yes, because we're moving in a good direction. But whenever we have too much yeses on one side, I get very suspicious, right? So we got to be careful where we're headed here.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that's why a lot of us are so overwhelmed, because we're just waiting to see, okay, it's like, have you ever seen Narcos? I think it was, where it was talking about where you get one boat full of drugs, but then there's like 20 boats that go by while you're catching this one boat, and you realize, oh, they kind of just gave you that boat. So I think a lot of us are just waiting in suspended attention.
Well, to that point, Alexandra, this is something that we talk about often on this show, where a lot of the issues that plague us, because I'm a self-identified conspiracy theorist, and we have, like a political party, we have our own important topics, that go along party lines. Fluoride, chemtrails, whatever the thing is, and
like
all
that.
of a sudden now it seems like they're represented. And so my issue with that is like these things were obvious all along. I'm not markedly intelligent. Why did I see them? I think a lot of us saw them. And so, yeah, I do have a lot of caution going into this. They are doing things that I like, but I recognize that these things were always happening and were easily addressed. It's like stop flying and poisoning the skies. Maybe that would be a good move. You just got to stop doing that. So now that they're doing all these things, they're addressing the fluoride, they're doing that. I'm like, okay. That's a very easy win for us. And so, yeah, that's a great analogy. One boat comes in, we celebrate, 20 more go by, we don't even notice that what they had in them. And
I'm looking for the 20, but I'm also trying to not be that black pill, just
Right.
insufferable person.
Yes. Yeah. That's my own mom. I say that she's on Black Pill Island. And so I just like, it's a balance. It's definitely
a balance. Yeah, it's a balance. But I mean, thank goodness there are people like you who are, you're not a licensed medical professional, but you're going into these things and you're kind of breaking this down for people in a way that's digestible. And we were fooled into thinking that it wasn't digestible. And I think that was a huge part of it, man, was like convincing us that we were too stupid to interpret these things. And we got to stop looking to these people. It goes back to that waiting for a governing body to tell you that you're correct. These are just people. Right. And they're intelligent people. They're certified and they have their diplomas in this and that. But they're not a different species. They've achieved a level of knowledge that you can achieve too if you just put in the time and read these things and learn these things. And I think we need to stop looking at ourselves as idiots and stop looking to them as the coveters of information that's beyond our grasp.
Well, and that's why I always refer to them as products, because that's what they are. I mean, any other product on the market, if you're passionate about that product, a microphone, a podcast microphone, you probably researched that podcast microphone before you purchased it. You find which one works for you. And then your car, you find, well, okay, is this gas mileage good in the environment that I'm living in? I live in a city or I live in the country. Is this the safety level? Because I have children, I want to make sure that its safety rating is fine. We research all products on the market, most of them. Why don't we do that for medical products? And that's kind of where I say you are just being an informed consumer by consuming this information, by educating yourself, by being knowledgeable and confident in your decisions. There's nothing wrong with that. And if somebody's telling you that, then they're being coercive.
What's really funny about that is if I'm looking up something and I find myself frustrated and unable to come to a conclusion or unable to understand exactly what it is that I need, well, I certainly just don't go, fine, and then just buy any old thing. And in a way, it's like we don't have the information, but the doctor tells us this is what we need or this is what's going to happen. And we go, I don't know, fine, whatever you say. We don't even do that in consumerism, but we'll do that with our own health. Let
me tell you, man, these people are in a lot of trouble because the moms have woken up. My wife at the supermarket, when it comes to my kids' stuff, like I buy them some stuff and like, this is a cool snack. And she's like, get out of here, throw it out. And she's like reading everything. And I'm like, these people are in so much trouble when the rest of the moms understand what they're reading on the side of these boxes. On their
and
labels.
Now we're getting the teachers involved because my kids, they have artificial dye sensitivities. And so now I've trained the teachers reading labels, and now they're starting to talk amongst themselves. And if you haven't seen, there's a great documentary that came out. It's called To Die For. It's a husband and wife. They have 2 kids, and they did this documentary by themselves, and it's fantastic. It's on Amazon, I think, Netflix, a few different other places that you can get it now. And I have been referencing the teachers to get it, the principal, and talking to everybody else. And so once you get like that community rallied around something, it really won't take that long for it.
That's great. Yeah, they messed up and they woke up the moms. And we really need to do something about this school system thing too, because there was a time when, when I make my son breakfast, because I typically make everybody breakfast in the morning. So I make everybody like eggs and bacon or whatever, just like a protein, high fat diet. And if he misses breakfast or if we're running low or late rather, he goes to school and there's, he goes, oh yeah, there's breakfast at school. And they told us that there's breakfast at school. I go, okay, cool. And one day recently I walked in with them in the morning because he was late. And when we walked in, I saw like a tiered lunch tray system for the kids to walk by and grab whatever they want. And I look at it and it's literally all pastries and chocolate milk. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what can they just do eggs or something like that? Can't they do something normal? And then it's like, you wonder why these kids
It's an egg shortage.
No eggs,
Come
yeah,
on.
the eggs is a shortage.
Sure.
But they can't focus, right? So you're on this diet of just like simple carbohydrates and refined sugars, and then that fuel source burns off, pretty rapidly. Next thing you know, you're irate, you're having mood swings, you're tired, and you can't focus, and your schoolwork suffers. And so I would love to see them. They've been feeding us pizza slices and chocolate milk since I was in school. For the love of God, change that.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
100% agree.
We'll see. Maybe one day. Listen, Alexandra, it's been a wonderful conversation. And I think that this is one of those episodes where I think we got some good information out to people, because a lot of the times on this show, we're exploring like some esoteric ancient conspiracy of some sort. And it's nice to bring it into modern day and give people some information that they can actually apply in their own lives.
Technically, this is Nephilim, though.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Are you aware? Do you know what the Nephilim are?
My husband's done a few studies. Yeah, when I told him I was coming, he was like, "Whoa, I want to watch."
Well, I'm sorry. Apologies to your husband. We didn't bring up too much of the spiritual implications or the biblical implications of it, but
you did bring it up in the. You talked about there being like animal genome and baby parts and stuff. That is by definition Nephilim. It's a
chimeric genetic manipulation.
If you haven't yet, you should look at Blessed by His Blood, the founder of that, her story. I won't tell it for her, but she would be a really good person to talk to.
We will look into it. Blessed by His Blood is what you said?
She was a pharmacist, and she received inspiration to start
that's very cool.
donation offering.
That's very cool. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to reach out to her then. Blessed by His Blood. All right,
yeah,
I got it.
Have her socials here. Okay.
Okay, so Alexandra, for the audience, one more time, where can everybody find your work? As it sounds like an incredibly valuable tool especially for parents.
JustTheInserts.com. Everything's there. My Instagram is linked right there in the top left corner. And then I'm also on X, Just the Inserts. And you can find my book, my free training course, all my guides. I have over 50 analytical deep dives into pharmaceuticals, from prescription pharmaceuticals to over-the-counter. It's all there.
Wow, you're killing it, man. 200,000+ followers.
Oh, excellent. Good. You're getting this information out to people. That's fantastic.
Little by little.
Little by little, man. But it's going to be a big wave. I think there is you were right when you said that we might be moving towards a pivotal moment. I think we are. And I think resources like your work are going to be tremendous for all these people trying to, navigate this new landscape as we move into it.
Definitely. And having these conversations. Thank you for having the bravery to talk about it. This is how we shift the culture.
There's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, and I don't know where we fall on it.
We
like to walk that line.
Well, actually, there's a thing that we say. We have like some merch on the show. It's called Retardio, and retard means return, and dio means God. And we just said you have to be retarded enough to return to God, which is like common sense. And I feel like that's where we're at. But we're also, you delve into dangerous territories because sometimes we just say things that we probably shouldn't be talking about.
Probably shouldn't be saying. That's all right. One of us is going to get a knock on the door soon. But Alexandra, I think you're pissing off the FDA more than we are. So, our prayers are with you.
Yeah. If she goes up missing, then I start to worry. But again, thank you for coming on. And to the audience, don't forget to obey, submit, and comply to your overlords. We'll see you guys later.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
If you can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture